From the hills of Lanarkshire, Scotland, to Middle England, we are privileged to have with us today Mr. Mark McLean. Known all around the world from his podcasts, focusing on the prophetic insights for our times. And I finally have been able to get him, not in studio, but close enough, broadcasting from across the Atlantic on this special episode. Mark, it is such a joy to have you joining us today.
Thanks very much for that, brother. What an introduction. That was a lovely surprise. I'm feeling it in the heart.
I know. The Braveheart. This is an epic moment, and I just couldn't resist to have, in a time where they're censoring everything, to have outlawed tunes on outlawed pipes.
Should have put my blue face paint on.
I know. Well, you have the blue behind you, and you have a white kind of line. So, well, anyway, with that nice introduction, it is a great joy to have you on. It was a pleasure to be on your podcast not long ago, and obviously lots of things to discuss. But I was always curious where you were from. You have a really cool homeland, or whatever you want to call it, your homeland in Scotland, of Lanarkshire. So it's near Lanark. And before we jump into anything else, Mark, can you just give us a little background of where you grew up? I mean, you're 2 miles from a major shrine, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but a lot of mystery behind Scotland. So you're our first Scot, even though you are now in England.
Yeah, Scotland has a great wealth of history, normally in the defence of those coming to try and take over the land, whether it's the Vikings or the English once upon a time.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a great Irish immigration. And yeah, Scotland has a great wealth of history, normally in the defence of those coming to try and take over the land, whether it's the Vikings or the English once upon a time.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a great Irish immigration into Scotland, and we've got that Celtic connection between the Irish and Scots. I grew up in the central belt, as it's called, between the major cities of Glasgow and Edinburgh. I would be roughly in the middle, just slightly closer to Glasgow, and a region called North Lanarkshire. So the place like Stirling, Lanark, Falkirk, they're probably anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes drive from where I live, and these are major areas, historical areas, with like the likes of William Wallace, the Battle of Falkirk or Stirling, things like that. And I also live a couple of miles or so away from the National Shrine of Scotland, which is Carfin Grotto, or the Lourdes Grotto, Carfin Lourdes Grotto. And again, great history over the years, where even the Spanish miners came once upon a time to do a lot of work. And I think it was either the mining or the steel or both. And they needed their Catholic churches. And we have quite a few churches in the area of Motherwell Diocese, which is within this part of the region I live. And it's the only landlocked diocese in all of Scotland, but it's got some great fruits. And Carfin Grotto is definitely a great shrine to go if you ever get to Scotland and want to see anything of the faith. In fact, the papal nuncio to the United Kingdom is going there just now as we speak, or he will be there tomorrow. I've been following a little online. He's came to visit the Diocese of Paisley with a very dear friend, Bishop John Keenan, who's the bishop of that diocese, and they've arranged, obviously, quite a bit of itinerary and his time with us in Scotland, and one of them is Carfin Grotto. And after speaking with yourself over, maybe a month ago now, you come on, you really opened my eyes more into how great Archbishop Fulton J was. And I remember just a year ago, a great surprise to many of us was the discovered photographs of the early days at Carfin Grotto, which is now a century old. And Archbishop Fulton Sheen was good friends of Canon Taylor, who created the grotto, the local parish priest who had this bit of land, put the miners to work. And Archbishop Fulton Sheen actually celebrated Mass at the outside altar near the Lourdes shrine. I see you've got the pictures up there. Great. Yeah, so the video I sent you, I was on those steps when I sent you that private video last week. But Canon Taylor had a great part and a great devotion to St. Therese of Lisieux before she was canonised, and played a part in that happening with a lot of writings and things like that. That's him there. He has the local high school named after him as well. But there's many great stories and miracles that if you ever see an old man or lady sitting around the bench and they've been there all their life, they'll have something special to tell, and you just spent a nice hour in the afternoon there. It's got the glass chapel to have Mass during the day, and if you get a nice day of the sunshine, it's a sun trap, and you can just sit there and pray, contemplate, or just take in the peace of the place. But it gets set up because 100 years ago there wasn't much work happening for the miners, and they put him to work there. And they had the Lourdes shrine dedicated. And looking at that photograph of Archbishop Fulton Sheen there, to his right would be the Lourdes sanctuary. It's a replica of the one that's in Lourdes itself. And to his left, behind him, would be St. Therese of Lisieux. And that's how it began, just with them. But now it's expanded for like a good couple of acres at least, with statues, the Way of the Cross, the glass chapel, which to me is like the equivalent of the oasis of peace that many of us know in Medjugorje. I call that my oasis of peace in Scotland. But what's there now in that photograph is the statues of Our Lady's parents, Joachim and Anne, St. Joachim and Anne, and the child Jesus in the centre. So things have moved. A lot of work went in a good 15 years ago to really get it in a good shrine status, because before it was like the red ash on the path that you'd just walk about, been there forever. But they started doing a lot of work in landscaping and new statues and things like that. There's so much to take in. But when you were telling me his devotion to Our Lady of Lourdes and the great connection of the Immaculate Conception, he literally was there in Lourdes, there in Carfin next to the Lourdes shrine, which I thought was amazing. And believe it or not, I wasn't there myself, but I know one or two of the Medjugorje visionaries over the years have came to Scotland, and I know one of them had their apparition at Carfin Grotto as well.
Really?
We're on holy ground.
That's remarkable. I never heard of that shrine. Of course, I didn't know that Fulton Sheen had been there. When this one and these are all images that you sent me that were off of. Move this over a little bit. Right from the Facebook page dedicated to the shrine itself. And this one has it at 1937. So he was just a Monsignor at that time. He wasn't a bishop until 1950, 51. Excuse me, right when he became national director for the Society of Propagation of the Faith, and then entered his television show. So if this would have been, as you can see him, he's kind of in his Monsignor colors, I guess. I mean, he wasn't a bishop then, so it's quite remarkable to see this. I don't know. These pictures have no date on them that I could find. I mean, you sent them to me, but here's one here. Look how young he is. And I'm not sure what this was. Maybe, do you know what the event was? Like, was this a procession? This one looks like part of a procession.
Yeah, I don't know too much. It's like I say, it was the young boys who are cousins came together at the Holy Family Parish in Moss End, which is the neighbouring parish from Carfin. And with it being the Holy Family, that's why they called their name Sancta Familia. So usually they're doing a lot of work where the church will take them on. They were based there at the parish for a while, but then they'll do a lot of live streams for church events, such as the nuncio will be there, sometimes funerals or weddings, things like that. But they were doing a lot at Carfin Grotto as well, and that's where these photos have been found somewhere in the parish, and they put them up for us. So there's a lot more to be discovered about it. But once upon a time, back in those days, Carfin Grotto would have attracted thousands and thousands over the years. I remember even as a young boy at my Holy Communion year, early 90s, the place was full and crowded. And again, it was another papal nuncio, I believe it was there.
Hmm.
And because all the dioceses had all the kids that made their first Holy Communion, we were all there, dressed up in their communion dresses and outfits. So I remember it always being a magnet for coachloads of people coming. And things have quietened down over the years, but since it's had a big uh, rejuvenation, so to say, to the outlook of it and everything, what they've got a calendar now where every diocese will have a day where the Diocese of Scotland would come, and everyone comes with their bishop. Parish days have been put in the calendar, so again, it's keeping it busy throughout the year. But they'll have big events as well. And I'm sure it was here at the Cerfin Grotto a couple of years ago, maybe. All the bishops of Scotland came and
Hmm.
they consecrated Scotland to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which was a big thumbs up for me, knowing all about Fatima and things.
Mm-hmm. When was that?
Recent years, like the last couple of years, maybe.
Wow.
Maybe I don't think it was before COVID. Maybe it was before COVID, but COVID seems to have lost a few years. For those times you always think it was 2 years ago, then it was 4 years ago.
Right.
Some within
Yeah.
that time scale.
Well, that is remarkable. Um, just as an introduction, of course, for everybody who's watching who may not be familiar with you, um, I mentioned you're a podcaster, and we share a similar background because my alma mater for my like postgraduate and postgraduate degrees were all from the same university, the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, also known as the Angelicum in Rome. You came after I was there. I finished my license in 2003, and then I did my doctorate in 2008. So I defended on October 13th of all dates. And then, believe me, I needed a miracle, it seemed like. But when were you there in Rome?
I went out in Rome as a seminarian in 2010, but I discerned to leave halfway through fourth year, so I left. It was the February of 2014. So I've been
Okay,
back.
so 10 years is that's not that long ago.
It doesn't
um,
feel that long ago.
no. And another thing that which is what attracted me was somehow when our paths crossed through. I'm not sure what the first link was. It may have actually been. You know what the first connection was I think a mutual friend of ours, Daniel O'Connor, and I was looking up something, and I'm like, oh, there's Daniel O'Connor. Was making his tour of the channels, it seemed, and then he's on your channel. So I started watching that, and I'm like, oh, who's this Scott? That's pretty cool. And then I had him on my podcast, and I said, "Who is that? Can you connect me?" And he gave me your information, and then I don't know, something. I think we're just everything got busy in life, and so I just kind of kept putting it off a little bit. And then the whole Xavier, Monique, Mary, and was it Mother and Refuge of the End Times. So anyway, our paths kind of got brought in there, and we both love and have felt a calling to do something very similar, and that is to help people connect the dots to what is really going on in the world, because our Lord was very specific for his disciples to understand the signs of the times, and we've taken that for granted that people do, but we're realizing today that very, very few do. So you do a masterful job in laying that out, timelines, putting this is where I really appreciate what you do, because you take the history, you take the theology, the spirituality, everything goes together, and then you help paint the picture for people. So thanks for being on, and then of course giving that introduction to the shrine. That was something I was going to talk about a little bit later, but since we did have it now, maybe you can kick us off as far as um, where where is Scotland right now, the church in Scotland, and now that I've just learned a whole bunch of new things, what is this? Uh, where do you see the role of Scotland playing into current and future events?
Yeah.
I didn't prepare you for that question. I think we were talking about other things, but I'm like, yeah, he's from Scotland. Now I'm super intrigued. This is like exclusive information here. Nobody else has talked about this that I know of.
No, I don't think I've even brought it up myself too much. You're probably best to ask me now than a few years ago when I left seminary. I was a bit torn up mentally, spiritually. I persevered from day one with then, and I think I did have some sort of spiritual oppression going on, but it's all good now. Thanks be to God. I grew up cradle Catholic. I grew up in a good Catholic upbringing. We weren't the strictest of families with daily rosaries or anything like that, but like every Saturday, my dad would have me over at my grandmother's, and my aunts would come with the cousins. Normally, we'd have a movie on, like the Song of Bernadette or The Miracle of Fatima, as I remember it, and I preferred Fatima because it was in colour, the old Warner Brothers movie, and we'd be playing out the back, we'd have lunch, dinner and things. But then if we were going to go a little trip, sometimes it'd be the swing park or something like that. But many times we would go up to Carfin Grotto. And it's the same with many local families. And even during lockdowns, people that would never maybe venture there all of a sudden needed to go their daily walks and things. You found a lot of new faces coming into Carfin Grotto as well. And just that sense of peace, being surrounded with all the statues and the cross and everything else and the chapel. And I always just remember it being our playground growing up. And again, you're surrounded with faith. You're surrounded with the Catholic faith and attending, obviously, weekly masses. But the rosary would happen regular enough, like special occasions at least, or during Lent, we'd say some, like a decade before school, we'd pray it in the evening. Um, and the parish priest, I always remember, was an old Irish priest we had for decades growing up. I was an altar boy for a few years as well. And he didn't just have a great influence and grip on the parish, but he also had it on the village. He was respected all round, like a proper stature of a man. He's the priest. And I always had that growing up. And I think I did go for a year when I was in my late teens. I did a year up in the Highlands at a place called Craig Lodge Community. It's also where the the family set up the charity called Mary's Meals, which is making an impact into America now as well as elsewhere. And it's Grapefruits of Medjugorje in a nutshell. But it gave me a chance to go up there for a year to figure things out after trying college first. But this grip of the faith, it's a whole story in my testimony itself. But that gave me an open mind to see how it connected with other prayer groups, how it connected with the pilgrim groups. There was a new thing starting up like New Dawn in Scotland. I saw people from all over the country doing these events, like church events. And if I wasn't going to them, I would be just thinking, I go to my Sunday Mass and monthly confession and a trip to Carfin Grotto at least once a week, and that would be all. But there is so much more happening, and I've managed to meet so many amazing people, especially the last 15 to 20 years all over the country, doing much more than that and wanting much more. And seminary kind of took away the naivety that I may have had going out there. And then it kind of dampened the flame for a bit because I was full of zeal, I was full of hunger. I couldn't get enough of God, and I wanted to go out there and set the world on fire. But I always kind of felt like it was too easy within the diocesan side, and I was used to going to the Friars of the Renewal. I did a week with the Carthusians, all these come and sees. But getting back to where it is now in terms of what's Scotland like, as I said earlier, the bishops in recent years consecrated the country to Our Lady of Fatima, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which I thought was a great thing because of that consecration with the Fatima story. And one of the bishops, Bishop John Keenan, used to be my spiritual director before seminary, and he continued to keep in touch during that time. He also helped, came down to marry my wife and I a couple of years ago as well. So we've remained close in that respect. And I respect him obviously in his position as bishop now. But especially under Benedict, Pope Benedict gave Scotland some fine bishops in recent years, and I've managed to met most of them on several occasions. And my own Bishop of Motherwell is Bishop Joseph Toll, is a very humble man and very to the letter in terms of what I've seen. Bishop Hugh Gilbert he was in the monastery up in northeast Scotland at Pluscarden, the Benedictine monastery. He was the abbot. He did an interview years ago. It's on YouTube still, I believe. He goes into a lot of the spiritual warfares, the battles while he was an abbot, and now he's bishop. And it's like that's a good choice as well. And there are many others, but Scotland only has don't test me on this, 7 or 8 dioceses only. So we're only talking 7 or 8 bishops, and it's a very small country, about 6 million people. And I think the Catholic population is under 1 million, just slightly under 1 million. But it's very strong, especially in the central belt areas between Glasgow and Edinburgh. But there is a spread throughout. And one thing about Scotland, I would say, historically, we've got that. I think even Queen Elizabeth says, the Scots are famous for being friendly until provoked. And that's when the Vikings to the English can even the Romans put Hadrian's Wall to keep us out from hitting back. So I think when it comes to the point when we do get pushed to stand up for our faith, when we do get pushed up for other things like that, we'll definitely do it. But it's a very close-knit feeling Scotland has that I always feel. And close-knitness means you wouldn't pass the person on the street. It's easy to strike up a conversation. And when it's in that faith side of things, it's all the more easier as well. There's a strong remnant in Scotland, and I think we do have strong bishops as well, for sure.
Interesting. Because we don't hear too much about what the church is like. I would say if there's one place that we measure or we observe more than others in the Isles, the British Isles, it's Ireland. The church in Ireland, and what's happened to Ireland, and especially to see that it's it was the last Catholic country to fall to abortion, and to be the first country anywhere that actually voted by the people's vote to legalize abortion. Otherwise, it's always through their parliament or Congress. They passed those things, but it was a referendum of the people where they voted for that. And that was in 2018, I think it was 2017. The first openly public homosexual prime minister. I mean, it was like massive fall within. What a time of a Jubilee of Fatima, but what a if you were looking at things at a deeper level, it was, my goodness, the convergence of everything that 1917 meant now 2017, as far as the opposition forces to the church and Freemasonry, all these anniversaries, Protestant Revolution, and there it is, Ireland, boom, gets hit. And then they rapidly fall, and they've been in free fall ever since. And so I wondered about England. I have some friends in England, up to the north in Yorkshire. But you never hear about Scotland, and what is the church like in Scotland, and what is its relationship, to what's going on in the other places? Is it very isolated in comparison to what is going on in England, what's going across, on the other island?
Yeah, well, I was up in Scotland just last week, visiting family and some friends. There is, I think it's a case, there's one thing we can gather together as friends or family and talk about things that can be better, or talk about some things that are shocking to us. But having to sit down with the bishops or the priests and try and get it from their point of view or perspective is another thing as well. I mean, the culture is very much going ahead like the rest of the Western world. And for a long time, we've had a socialist government that the people voted in, the Scottish National Party. But they've kind of been turned around now with the Labour votes this year just happening with the tyrant Davos Prime Minister Keir Starmer, as I call him now, the Davos tyrant. But yeah, you can see the socialism after 20 years kind of creeping in subtly, which I think is the key way that they want to do it, subtly, winning the people over with keeping many promises that they did. But it's moved back to Labour again now. But what's been coming, and it's going to continue anyway, so what's that continuance of? Well, like all the gay rights, the gay adoptions. I mean, there was I think it was St Margaret's adoption charity set up, and it was a religious organisation. When they brought in gay adoption long before the gay marriage years ago, they had to close because of the faith side of things. So that happened in Scotland. I saw through the Tony Blair government in the late 90s, early 2000s, as a young teenager starting to take wind of politics a little bit more. We felt we're becoming very quiet, like quietism, don't offend, the PC culture. But then at the same time, we're seeing the Bibles taken out of public places such as hospitals or hotel rooms, the Gideon's Bible or something like that. Crucifixes were offensive. People were getting told at places of work to cover it up. It was taken out of university buildings or something like that. Even one time I remember reading in the news that somewhere in Edinburgh, someone came around and says there's been a complaint, take away all the Scottish flags off the desks. And I read another story about a man had his own flag mast in his garden, which you don't see a lot of here compared to America. But he had it with the Scottish flag, and the police came saying, you need to take it down. There's been a call about it. And it's like, where's our culture? This is our country. And we don't see it the same as England when it comes to that right now, like the last few weeks with things boiling over. But I usually often find that this is my complaint, is the church is silent about it all. For 20 years I've seen LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBT A to Z, and it's like every time the year comes round and it's the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in the first reading, you never get any priest talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. In fact, the only remembrance I have in 20 years was a priest, the parish priest that came to it, and I was just out of seminary, and this was a new priest that replaced the good old one that we had for many, many years, and he gave us a poem. And I have no idea what the poem was. I have no idea what the point he was trying to make. But I just remember saying, you've just had a chance yet again in the time that we need it most to speak up and teach the Catholic faith, even in the most compassionate way, but with the truth. And all we got is a poem. That's all I remember. Nonsense. And it's creeped in more and more. And I think the faithful are really crying out to say, right, why has nothing been said? But my worry is this great apostasy, is the darnels very much in the harvest. And I think when I went to seminary, that's when I realised the more the naivety of automatic respect to the priests or clergy, automatic belief that everyone's in the same boat here, we're out here for the Lord, and that it dampened the fire down in me more and more, month after month, year after year. And my gut told me all along never to go to the diocesan side. But I did for all good reasons in the end. But those reasons and all the plans I had for the Lord, make him laugh by telling him your plans. But I left completely shattered, as we say here. I was running on empty. And the obsession that grew in seminary for me actually was the effeminacy amongst the seminarians, the whiff of homosexuality, the campness, and even those that might not have shown too much, but a couple of drinks down them, you could start seeing it coming out a bit more. The duplicity, as I used to say, they had more faces than the town clock. As we say, if you get ones in your areas as well, I used to say they would show face at the front door while selling their gran at the back door type of thing. I just felt it was like a light switch with emotions on or off, and then this whiffery. And it turned out like two of the younger seminarians that I had suspicions about in the final year ended up getting married to each other.
Oh my gosh.
So I wasn't wrong about it all. But if I dared to say anything, or the few good guys had to say anything like that at all, we were always the ones afraid that we would get chucked out. Now, fair enough, we never went to the staff, we never knew the full truth, but that was always our worry. But yet, that shouldn't have even been there as a worry if we're really there for Christ. And I think we're just seeing many people in the culture, in the country, including those within the church, that are just accepting anything because they've been desensitized to it now for a continuous of 20 years that I've counted in my life, where it's just one thing after the other. And yeah, that's all I can say with that. But I was told through people I still keep in contact within the church and even in education that the local councils, the local governing bodies, they're having meetings over the past year or so with clergy, with teachers of the Catholic Church, Catholic schools, and it's the case, all about inclusivity, I should say. And a friend of mine who's a teacher is saying like a boy's now identifying as a girl at the Catholic school, and he's in the girls' changing rooms now because that's the law. But I've never once heard the priest speak out about any of it in 20 years that I can recall.
Mm.
And that's the bit that gets me. And again, it's like, is the Scots just friendly until provoked? Where's the final part? Well, Bishop John Keenan was one of the first ones to bring out a response to the Paris Olympics ceremony. So again, he's done that. He's also the bishop that's went to the March for Life in London for the last several years. Now we've got 5 bishops going this year. So they're showing it in ways. But I think some people, maybe we're just overzealous or we want something more. But what does that mean? Because I think at the end of the day, if a bishop had to say something crystal clear of the priest, they're under the same foot of the law as the rest of us, and they're going to go to jail automatically. Is that what they're afraid of? Yet people in Nigeria are being killed for attending Sunday Mass. Look what's happening in China. We're too comfortable in the West. Far too comfortable.
It's amazing how, no matter where you go, the problems are pretty universal. When did your interest get peaked to the point where you started really diving in to what really is going on in the world, and the importance of and really feeling a call to get on a podcast, start broadcasting, and informing people, warning people, encouraging people, all the things that I hope that we can do in the rest of our podcast here. When did that start?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to the interest in Our Lady herself with the apparitions. And I keep meaning to do a video on my testimony, and I'm like, how much do I share? How much is important? Because then you'll get the story. Like I
Well,
said,
I'll give you 60 seconds to summarize it. So here's your test. No, I'm just kidding.
no, I'll try. I know I'm long-winded, just like Xavier and a few others, but there's so much there to share.
Myself.
Yeah, true enough. Yeah, you need to watch the video on my channel. But that's what it is. That's the fire. That's the zeal, and that's how we can relate. But yeah, growing up cradle Catholic, like I was saying earlier, with the family and all that as well. But it was second year at college in Scotland, and I was quite close to home, so I was living back at home. I was just going to the local college, and like any other day, you get some flexi time, but the bus came once per hour. And this particular day, rather than window shop and kill half an hour, I went into the church. Now, this cradle Catholic who just attended Sunday Mass and was an altar boy for a few years was like this to make sure no one saw him going into the church during the day, like Wednesday afternoon or something. But to my surprise, this empty church, which was just open for anyone to come in for a short prayer and then leave, the Blessed Sacrament was exposed. There was adoration on a little corner at the back, and it had a couple of thick swing doors, maybe 10 seats inside. It was so small and intimate. And I went in there, And I think I only remember adoration in the parish 2 or 3 times in my young life at this time, but I knew I had to go down on 2 knees. And then I sat down, and I chose to sit next to the statue of Our Lady of Fatima. And it reminded me years ago at my grand's every Saturday watching the movie Fatima, the Miracle of Fatima. And I said a few prayers, then I left for the bus. Next day, I had half an hour to kill again, and I decided to go back into the chapel. Again, adoration was on. I had no idea of timetable. I just went in to see, and there I was. I said a few prayers, but then the next day, and then at the weekend, I'm like, I'm going to go online and get the prayers of the Rosary. I know how to say the Rosary decades. I just don't know what the decades are. I don't know how to say the big prayers at the end. So next day again, I get the paper out, and I felt inspired when I was 7 to get these rosary beads from the parish stall after Mass. And I took them into the priest and put them under the confessional curtain to get them blessed. And now I'm 19 and I'm like, what did I do with those rosary beads years ago? And I went into this walk-in cupboard that had absolutely everything in it, and all the shelves and boxes and everything. I found them within 30 seconds, like I knew where to find them. And I got them. And my dad was clearing out stuff in his room, and I saw a small book with the face of Jesus on it. Will you help me? And then I read it. I said, can I read that? Yeah, take it. It was the Divine Mercy, which I never knew nothing about. And I was always quite a bit of hypochondriac for a few years as a teenager. But when I read the words that he was saying in the Divine Mercy, it just blew me away. And then there's a chaplet. And then the video, the VHS he had was Medjugorje. I says, what's that? I says, the place where Our Lady's meant to be appearing. And that was like my answer, because see this week or two building up with starting to say the rosaries. Now I'm learning the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. I watched that video, then I'm starting to Google it. But I was at my grand's during this time, within a week or two of going into the chapel, and I'm like, do you still have those old videos of the Miracle of Fatima? And she went up and said, yeah, there's one there, take it. So this is still with the VHS times 20 years ago. So I watched the Miracle of Fatima when I come home after college and being in the church. And I had tears in my face at the miracle, and it was tears of passion. And of course I'm thinking, if she could only appear again like that, I would go. And that's when my dad had the video. So everything started fitting. I know I've got it round the wrong way there, but everything came in time. The desires, there was the answer. Medjugorje, she's there now. And so within 6 weeks, killing time for the bus, then the next day, then it was the case I want to get back into the church. I want to get back in. And within 6 weeks, I was getting in every day, and I was staying 2 to 3 hours. Rosary, Divine Mercy, Rosary, Divine Mercy. But the Rosary became so deep, like I lost my senses to my surroundings, especially the sorrowful mysteries. It became really, really sincere, a very vivid imagery. And then the next week, it was like it evolved into the feelings of how he was in pain and why he did it. And then the third week, all that with, he did it for me. It just kept evolving. And I'm always sitting under the statue of Our Lady of Fatima. But 6 weeks into it, and I start getting paranoid that I'm wasting my time. I'm not praying properly. And of course, I know old Nick now, but back then I'm like, I'd never heard of spiritual warfare. I never heard of the charismatic gifts. Never really remembered the gifts I got at confirmation. I'm just a cradle Catholic. So I was away again one day, losing my senses to everything. And my dad always had a great devotion to Padre Pio. And I knew all the stories growing up very well of him and the miracles. And I'm praying away, and Lord, give me an answer. Am I wasting my time? Blah, blah. And it's like I get a tap on the shoulder, and I get a big fright, because I was really deep in prayer as always. And many days I'm in there myself. And it was this lady. She gave me a card of Padre Pio's intercession. I said, thank you very much. And that was her leaving. And I've even heard her coming in, and I'm right at the door. And so I say a prayer. Next day I'm back, and I get so paranoid. I'm talking to him personally now, which I never did before. It just evolved. But again, you're just sitting there giving comfort and being with him in the Eucharist. So I says, Lord, as a Catholic, I don't expect to see miracles here. But unless you show me that you're happy the way I'm praying, I'm not going to do it anymore. It's messing my head. So if you're happy, show me. I twisted it. And then I looked down and I saw the Padre Pio intercession card, which I probably had more confidence in him at the time because of the stories, the videos, the photos. So I said that intercessory prayer, put it down, ready to leave for the bus after being here 2 hours. And it's just the way the statue of Our Lady caught my eye. And I'm on my knees praying at this point. Her face looked wet, but it was this feeling growing in my stomach, like, you know, you go down a hill in the car fast, it takes your breath away. Something was building up, and I was glued, but I knew it was probably just the light. But it's as if someone turned my head, like my guardian angel just turned, and it went in the Eucharist bang on, and that feeling just woof, and it knocked my back against the chair. And it was this feeling of conviction that he was happy.
Mm.
It was this feeling of great joy. And I'm like, what just happened? And I was like, thank you. I was like, I need to go for my bus. But see, the whole way to the bus, it was like half an hour journey getting home. And I couldn't stop, like, the smirks and the laughing. And it was like something. So I've spoke to a few priests over the years, the friars and that, and they say, sounds like a fresh baptism in the Holy Spirit or something. But I never knew any of these names or anything like that. I was just praying and meditating deeply. And so the whole point of this to say is that's when it began.
Mm.
Then people just started coming into my life who'd been to Medjugorje, and I'm like, I just discovered this video a week ago. Say, well, we've just been to help me all the stories. I'm reading into all Medjugorje. They were going to this place, Craig Lodge in the Highlands. I went up there. So I need to join this place, give up the studies and that. And because this is when the first time priesthood came to mind.
Mm.
But then I started looking into Fatima, and it was something that was still in postal orders back once upon a time. And the same church had things lying up the back, like America needs Fatima. And I think there's an outlet or something with that.
Yeah, it's called America Needs Fatima. Yeah, it still exists.
So I was reading in Fatima. I was looking up the websites and dial-up broadband. I was then Medjugorje came, and I remember in Medjugorje she says, "I will finish here what I began in Fatima. My Immaculate Heart will triumph." And what was she talking about? So of course Fatima was the first love, but then a Garabandal, then a Kita, then I was like, "What's going on?" And I automatically always noticed the dates. October 13th. May 13th, I started noticing this. And what I've learned as I've grew up through different psychology tests or team leader tests and things, I'm quite analytical. So I would be good as a data analyst to a certain degree. And I'm like, well, that answers why I can see these dates. But as soon as you start looking at why she's came, the messages, everything, as Benedict says, Pope Benedict said a few years before he retired, those who think Fatima's in the past are deceiving themselves. Fatima's for the future still. And he prayed that in these last few years, as we approach the centenary, may we pray for the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. So that's him saying that as well. So when I started seeing all this and connecting the dots and going in pilgrimage to Medjugorje a few times, I went to Fatima, I went to Garabandal, I went to Lourdes to help a parish. But I never counted Lourdes as part of it all till I met Xavier. Because even Lourdes, like La Salette, have been covering up the secrets. And this big secret of Fatima. But then you start seeing where the world's going. And for me, it's that parallel of society and the church at the same time. And when you look into all of them, even Tre Fontane is my newfound one. I cannot believe I was in Rome for nearly 4 years and I never heard of Tre Fontane apparition to Bruno, the Virgin of Revelation. And that's
Well, you can tell us about that in a minute. That's actually on my list of things because
because now I can see what her plan is and how it's opposed to so much as what's happening in the world. And even 20 years ago, 15, 10 years ago, it was anyone's guess, I used to say. But now I'm saying it's right before our eyes. It's at the doorstep. That's what I feel now.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to kind of funnel us into the meat of our conversation. Well, first, thanks for sharing so much about your own story, the church in Scotland and that region, because it's not really talked about. I know very little about what's really gone on, and just being through you, being introduced to, you pronounce it differently than I would probably. Was it, you say Carfin? Carfin?
Carfin.
Carfin? But is it Carfin, like the second? So anyway.
Yeah, Carfin. Yeah.
Okay. So, but at any rate, I find that my mind, of course, is very analytical like yours. So I'm thinking, well, what does that have to do with Fulton Sheen and everything that I'm doing and what God's been giving me? And so I can help connect some more dots too, because you begin to see a more of a global picture coming together, and the connection with Lourdes. And of course, that was Fulton Sheen's favorite spot to go. He went there over 30 times. Every time he went to Europe, he promised he'd go there, and he always went. He had miracles take place when he was there, conversion stories. It's just ridiculous. The things that it's such great love, and of course, Immaculate Conception is what our country's consecrated to Mary under the title Mary the Immaculate Conception. The United States was the first country of any country to be consecrated to the Immaculate Conception before the dogma of the Immaculate Conception even happened. So we have a connection to that whole Holy Spirit movement, you can say, because it was 1846, 1847 that Pius IX gave permission for the bishops in the U.S., Baltimore area. I mean, that was kind of the congregation there of the bishops to consecrate. And next thing you know, that's the time of La Salette. Then you have Lourdes, the dogma, 1854, 1858. You have Our Lady says, I am the Immaculate Conception. So like the age of the Immaculate Conception has just exploded. So when you hear things like that, you're like, wow, like God is not distant. Like this is so real. It's so in front of us right now. And like you were saying too, like if we had this conversation 10 years ago, we probably would be still speaking like, oh, a lot of these things to come. And we do speak like that. But we're now literally living in a time of prophecy being fulfilled as we're talking. And then some still yet of things yet to come. And as we go into the fall here, especially here in the U.S., but many places around in Europe and around the world, the fall is always a big time. We have that big election, if we ever have it, that's coming up in November. And regardless of what happens, it's a historical marking point of something that will be, there will be massive changes taking place. I don't know what it is, but we absolutely know no matter what happens, or if it doesn't happen, things are going to be absolutely crazy in this country alone. But then you have these other things happening in other countries as well. So one of the things I was hoping you could share is what has the Holy Spirit brought onto your radar? What are you focusing on? Because there's a lot of things being said. There are a lot of people who follow different channels. They're kind of like apparition prophecy chasers. Maybe not all for the best reasons, because like they're just fascinated. But this is real. Souls are at stake. This is what John Paul II called clearly the final confrontation between, the gospel, the anti-gospel. Sheen said the same exact thing in the 1940s, or the days of the apocalypse, end of an era. Everybody who's tuned into the Holy Spirit knows this, and the signs are everywhere. So as we go into the fall, of all the things to contemplate, what things has God put on your like intellectual / spiritual radar that you think is important for us to be discerning?
Yeah. So I think with my long-winded answer before, I forgot to say how I came to all that stuff, because that all led me to seminary. But as I was saying earlier, seminary was tough and painstaking, and in the end, I did leave and discerned it that way as well. But the final 6 months in seminary, in the privacy of my own room, I discovered YouTube. Also discovered like normal people were making videos on it, and I actually discovered all the preppers. And I don't know how I came across it, because I must have been looking up like Scotland, and then I saw like the wild camping in Scotland that led me to survivalism and then preppers, and I'm like, what is this? But then it's like, well, they're preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. They're preparing for doomsday. They're preparing for Armageddon. They're preparing for societal collapse, whatever. And I'm like, I've been spiritually preparing all these years for the confrontation. You know, whatever Our Lady's plan is, I've been spiritually, mentally preparing all along, but I never once heard the name prepper. So I kind of went a little wind away with the prep, and I'm getting home and I'm buying whatever savings I had. I got an iMac, I got a camera. I learned from mistakes along the way, making videos and all this sort. But that's when it grabbed me. It's like, well, you are preparing for all these things. I'm going to tell you why I'm preparing, because that's the one thing I thought a lot of preppers never showed or spoke about, is what's informing you to do this. What's your source? And my source is the Blessed Virgin Mary. My source is Jesus Christ. My source are the saints, the mystics. And what I'm seeing analytically, the same dates, or, you know, October 13th was Pope Leo the 13th's experience of God giving Satan the time and the power to test the church. October 13th in Fatima, October 13th in Akita, Japan. You know, for example, May 13th, the first apparition of Fatima. May 13th, the Pope gets shot in 1981. So that's what got me into this, and I'm like, I need to get videos out there. People need to see this. And I was hesitant after a while because it went the prepper route and all the rest of it. But I did do a few when it was still early on, a few years back, and I noticed the difference between outdoor videos and prepping and all this. The Marian apparitions were way ahead in views. And I'm like, because in my heart of hearts, this is what it was always about. And last August, I went back to Medjugorje for the 5th time. It was the first time in a few years. And I get a great grace there, which I haven't told too many people about. But the other thing I got was a solid, sincere, true conviction. It's all or nothing now. It's all or nothing. And I've held on to it ever since last August. It's been a year now. It's all or nothing. I'm fed up trying to be diplomatic and open to dialogue and trying to convince people in the nicest ways. So, no, I'm Catholic. This is my faith. If you don't like it, that's your trouble. But I'm fed up trying to do it. I'm proclaiming the truth. That's it. And look what happened to the apostles. Look what happened to Jesus. They proclaimed the truth, and what happened? They were martyred. They were killed. They were sacrificed. You know, at the end of the day, the church get rid of Jesus because of he was speaking the truth, and they didn't know who he was in the end. And the same with the apostles. So I'm actually in the last 12 months, maybe a good 4 or 5 times, for the first time in my life, these few times this year, I'm thinking, is it really possible, like, one day soon we could be facing martyrdom? Is that too extreme? But then you see Cardinal Burke speaking about that just recently as well. And I think what we're seeing now, when we bring everything into context, like you mentioned earlier, the timeline, I felt after seeing it myself, having interviews with various people, and especially Xavier the past 12 months, we need to see a visual. And to the best of my own humble ability, and thanks for the feedback at the beginning, because I just hope it is coming across clear. Are you seeing what I'm seeing, type of thing? And I'm not saying it's concrete gospel, but I'm saying, I'm asking, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because even Xavier says on the channel, even last year, 2024 is going to be a very pivotal year. Now, why is that? It's because not only have the apparitions coming to the point where she says now in Medjugorje, I'll finish here what I began in Fatima, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. We're talking a new era. We're talking the conversion of Russia, which is very inviting right now. We're talking about the fact that an era of peace will come. And I did an interview with a great biblical scholar a few months ago, Frances Hogan, and the new thing she's got me into right now is trying to work out and learn about the calendars, the ancient calendars, the calendars of jubilees, because even they are fitting for the new era next year. And what's next year? It's the year of Jubilee.
Mm-hmm.
Because 2024 is, I agree so far with Xavier's theory when he first published his book, Marie-Julie Géhenne, the great French mystic, holy, holy woman, she had over 100,000 pages of prophecies and visions written down. And she's right up there with the likes of Padre Pio, the Stigmata and things, Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, one of the greatest mystics of the church. Marie-Julie Jahenny spoke about a time would come where we would see mass immigration into Europe. We would see Russia coming over the Rhine River right through to France, decimating everything along its way, including a part of France. And she also spoke about the time where the long reigning Queen of England would pass, and the new sovereign on the throne would witness the disintegrating relationship between the United Kingdom, or England, as she would say, Israel and Persia. Now, this was back in the 1800s, right through to her death in 1941. She died at a good old age. Back then, there was no sign of any Queen of England, because we had to have the abdication of the uncle in order for Elizabeth's father to take the throne. And when he passed, Queen Elizabeth came at a very young age. And she's not only a long-reigning queen, she's the longest reigning Queen of England ever. And we have seen that. We are living in historic times to see that. Now, as a Scotsman, I never really put much effort into the royal family, but I had great respect for the Queen in recent years especially. And I think since her death, something spiritual's happened in the land and in the world. And let's look back to what Marie-Julie Jahenny said. When the long-reigning Queen of England would pass, this is when everything will start happening. Now, in the prophecy, Jesus says lots of these things will come round the year 80 or 83. And Xavier, again, is the one who brought all this to my attention in his book and spoke about it at length. He says, whatever future dates or past dates you put, none of it made sense to fit with context. But if you put those years onto the year she died in 1941, plus 80, plus 83, it brings you to 2021, 2024. Has the long-reigning Queen of England passed in this time? Is the new sovereign on the throne witnessing the relationship between Israel and Persia disintegrate? Are we seeing mass Muslim migration into Europe, where she says they'll shake the dust off their feet? Basically, they're saying they're not going to integrate into the Christian society of Europe. And this
they never have, by the way. That's the one thing about them is, not to interrupt you, but that's never ever happened. It's not part of their religion to do that. So, and historically Christianity was the same way as well, in the sense of its expansion. It was there was so combined in a Christendom sense of the king, the power of Charlemagne and onward, of bringing sort of a new Roman Empire, you can say, which was the church, a spiritual one, but they had to conquest all the pagans, and because there couldn't be a coinciding in culture and civilization like that. Well, the Muslims do it the same way, but they're much more militant and justifiable, whereas the Christians didn't quite see it like that. But anyway, it's a clash waiting to happen.
It's not just the fact that she's the only one that's brought this to my attention, because for all the stuff of the Garabandal and the four popes, then we're in a new era. For taking in Akita, for taking in Fatima still, and then now Medjugorje, plus everything else in the mix, it's kind of like, well, you couldn't make up the timing. And I don't know if you want, I can quickly show that timeline to your viewers if I share the screen.
Yeah, so Peter, what I did over a year ago now, after my own years of reading and researching through more of a hobby than anything, I'm not trying to break a code or find a mystery. There's nothing about that. It's just the fact that so many things are becoming evident, and there's so many videos out there and so many channels, and now more people are talking about it. It's like, well, let's try and get some visuals that help us. We like our visuals these days with all the screens and screen times that we have. Visuals are important. And I actually find myself learning better through the videos and things. So we covered Marie-Julie Jahenny already. But if you look here in the timeline, the reason I've got from Last Select working its way through time, and as the arrow continues into 2025 there, you'll see the fact that Last Select was first mentioned Now, La Salette, again, you'll see I'm a colour coder. La Salette back in 1846 through to now, why would it still be important right through to today and into 2025 onwards? Well, there were certain things that ended up being hidden inside the Vatican archives, and as Xavier put in his book, it was only found by sheer accident in 1999, where the young boy Maxim wrote to his bishop as well as the Pope at the time, speaking about how many of these things that Our Lady told him would occur in the late 1980, well, sorry, the late 20th century. But if we responded in kind, it would be delayed into the 2000s. Now, then Marie-Julie Jahenny came about with a lot of her prophecies, and some of that, like I've mentioned, with the Queen of England, the mass migration, Russia, all this, is still concurrent for this time. And she also prophesied the date of the death of the young girl of La Salette. Is it Melanie, I think her name was? But then we've had the Pope Leo's mystical experience, we've had Dan Catherine Emmerich, all it. They could put so much more into it. But Marie-Julie Jahenny right through to now with the 2024, everything's fitting because you'll see with the years 8083, if you add that on to 1941, it brings you through to 2021, 2024. And that's why it's still important for now. And that's why this year is pivotal, what's coming into next year. Fatima, as we know, occurred in 1917, and it's still important for now. The centenary's been reached, but do we have the conversion of Russia? Are we seeing many other signs that's still happening? What did she say in Medjugorje? I will fulfill here what I began in Fatima. Medjugorje's still underway, so Fatima's still important for the times. Garabandal in the 1960s is still important for now because not only about the four popes prophesied, then we get into a new era, but also the fact that the Great Warning, the illumination of conscience, is to occur, as it's been echoed throughout the centuries with other mystics and saints as well, not just Garabandal. But Akita, Japan, 1970s right through, even just couple of weeks ago, August 15th, Sister Sasagawa just passed away. And I just think of all the years that great lady had to pass, it had to be as we approach these final months of this prophetic pivotal year. And again, it's linked to Fatima, as even then Joseph Ratzinger, our beloved Pope Benedict, told us. So let's start with Garabandal, which I thought was a clear indicator. The says in Garabandal back in the 60s, after John the 23rd, there would be four more popes. One would have a short reign, but after the popes have done, we get into a new era. The first was Pope Paul VI. Then we had John Paul, who reigned for the short term of 33 days. John Paul II, and then Pope Benedict. Now, if heaven couldn't keep us in suspense, there's your four popes. However, we end up getting him retiring, and then we get Pope Francis. Now, this is the prophesied pope, two popes, according to Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. And I know there's something in history in the past about two popes, and there's all rumours and talks of and a serpent in the Vatican at one time when another pope was elected and all this. But we do see in public we had two popes. And as Francis Hogan told me, with this new era and this cycle of jubilees, which is my newfound hobby I'm trying to start up and learn, she says the time of Jesus when he died on the cross, that was the end of the law, the era of the law of the Mosaic era. And we're now in the era of grace, also known as the era of the church. And just like that era at the time of Jesus, there was the two high priests. And now as we approach this new era, we have the two popes prophesied by Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. So the typology is still there with our leaders. And of course, we're at the end of the list of St. Malachi. I mean, unless there's a gap in between that some people are trying to work out, Petrus Romanus, we're at the end here with that convening with it as well. So quite a few are circling conveniences round about this time. This Pope Francis has a lot going for him. Now, last select, like I was mentioning, came with Pope Pius the Ninth, and Pius the Ninth was the one that done a lot for the Immaculate Conception as well. Pope Leo the 13th knew Marie Julie Johanni and knew about the last select stuff as well. He was a great one. They both were at a time where Marie Julie Johanni was known. Now, remember the long reigning Queen of England and why back here in France, between them, Maxim spoke about how it would be delayed until the 2000s. Marie-Julie Johanni, if the theory's right, 21 to 24 of these years, the long reigning Queen of England would pass, and she has done. But what was the delay? Why did the things not occur in the late 20th century, as Maxim wrote in those letters that were hidden in the archives until 1999? What could have occurred to delay everything happening, to win us time? How did we respond in kind? And there, as you'll see under Pope Francis, the light blue just appeared, which I need to colour code since I updated it with Medjugorje. It was white and it couldn't be seen. So Medjugorje was 1981 to the present day, just several weeks after Pope John Paul II was shot on the Fatima anniversary. A few weeks later, she appears in Medjugorje. What I began in Fatima, I will fulfill in Medjugorje. My Immaculate Heart will triumph. And that's a big statement for everyone that knows stuff about Fatima. But then this was made best part of a year ago. I did this. Now look where we are here in August of 2024. This pivotal year of everything Marie-Julie Johanni said. The fact that in the same week, the Monday leading up to August 15th, which was the Thursday, the few days before it and the Monday, Louisa Picaretta's cause of canonization is back ahead, and the divine will was given the nihil obstat. I haven't read a lot into it, but I know it's very popular just now. But then a few days later, Sister Sasagawa passes away, and the great solemnity of the Assumption of Our Lady. Why 2024? This 93-year-old lady lived all these years, and for all the decades since Akita, had to die in this particular year. And there's something coming out of Akita that I haven't heard before over the years, and I don't know if it's true, but they say when Sister Sasagawa would pass, this is when the prophecies of Akita would start to unfold. And coincidentally, it's 2024, which picks up with the theory with Marie-Julie Johanni. And remember, next year is the year of Jubilee, and as Francis Hogan says, with those calendars of Jubilees, it coincides with them as well, separately from the private revelations. Next year is that new era beginning, according to the calendars. So everything is pointing to now, everything's pointing to this pontificate of Pope Francis. I don't know if it will be his immediate successor or not, but Petrus Romanus is to lead the flock through difficult times, persecution of the church. And I do believe where it fits with the popes of Garabandal and everything else that's happening, we're starting to see it simmer. We're starting to see how the church is becoming more about dialogue, more about ecumenical stuff. There, the church gave a bit of land in Florence a week or two ago for the first mosque to be built in Florence, and the church did it as a good gesture. Do they not want to bring them in to see what it's like to have Jesus in the Eucharist? It's all of this Abrahamic religions. It's all this different stuff where I'm getting more uh, weary about it. And just in that note, I mean, you can pick up the questions as well, but I did do this as a presentation a couple of weeks ago because there's one quote that stood out even with the Trefontani one. If I could quickly find it here, I'm sure I still had it up. just based on what I just said there about all the ecumenical stuff, see this one here?
And just
So,
as a preface for what you're describing here, just give us a quick, like 20-second intro to these revelations, private revelations associated with Tre Fontane.
yeah, so it was she first appeared to a lady 10 years to the date beforehand, saying that she would appear again to make use of a man who's a great persecutor of her and the church, a persecutor of Jesus. And if anyone it was due to have a St. Paul Damascus experience, it was Bruno, the man she appeared to. I think it was at Cornocchiola, I forget how to say his surname, but he's a brute of a man. But he ended up having her appear, and she was very blunt with her messages. She's told him off. You know, you persecute me enough now. That was her opening line. But she was unapologetic for declaring the Catholic Church the one true church of her son and all this as well. But this is the two messages that I copied. There's thousands, excuse me, that Bruno had throughout the rest of his life, right through to the early 2000s, I think it was, he died. There was talk that he even predicted 9/11
Hmm.
to the popes and everything else in between. Now he wrote down in 1988, I pray what I have dreamed will never happen. It is too painful, and I hope the Lord will not allow the Pope to deny all the truths of the faith, to put himself in place of God. Well, that's quite new for me. How much pain I felt in the night. My legs became paralyzed and I could no longer move for the pain which I felt when I saw the church reduced to a mass of ruins. Then March 13th, 2000. I've got a star next to this. Do you know why?
Why?
You know what March 13th stands out for you?
March 13th?
It's not an apparition.
No, it's not March 13th. Um, Something to do with Lords, maybe. No, it's not. No, that's not an apparition, and that's
It was
February.
the date Pope Francis was elected.
Oh,
Now, listen to the message with thinking of him. Remember, after the four popes of Garabandal and everything else circling him, at the time of the two popes, etc. My children, salvation is not bringing together all religions to make them a cluster of heresies and mistakes, but to convert them in the unity of love and faith. Now, I think
hmm.
that'll continue on even after Francis. I'm not saying it's all on him, but the only thing I linked with March 13th was his, the date he came out. And I said there's a good Orthodox community near where I live, and I had long talks with one of the Orthodox brothers earlier in the year. He actually sent photos, stills of when Pope Francis came out on the balcony. I was there in Vatican Square as a seminarian when that happened. And but I remember we were waiting a little bit of time when all the cardinals come out with the lights on. We were waiting for a good 10, 15 minutes. And the photo stills that this Orthodox brother sent me was it was March 13th, 2013. And Pope Francis come on the balcony local time at 2013.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that was deliberate with him or those round about it, but great infiltration with the Masonic stuff and everything else. I just thought, well, he's adding all these little bits in, fair enough. But that's the only thing with March 13th that stood out with me. But you know what? A lot of other ones people haven't spoke about, I've covered on the channel. I'd need to look back on the dates again. Again, as a seminarian in Rome, I recall when, let's see if I can get this a little lighter, brighten it up. I recall when Pope Benedict announced his retirement, we were all in shock in Rome. That very evening, lightning strikes St. Peter's Dome. Now, I need to look back in the dates. It's on a video on the channel because I saw it. I saw the signs. That was your fourth Pope done. That was us at near the end of the Malachi list. Now we're getting into a prophesied time of two popes. Lightning strikes the dome when he announces his retirement. Sealed. But then we have a meteor soon after landing in Russia,
Mm.
Russia's key. But then another meteor a little while later lands in Argentina, the home of this pontiff. And I'm
Mm.
just like, in the vastness of space, you cannot make this up. Why it had to
Oh.
happen these in this prophetic timing. Is it signs from the heavens? I don't know, but I just noticed it. I saw it. And we do read in the book of Revelation about the stars falling from the sky. Yes, we know it can relate to the priests and the clergy who are taking us just like the stars navigate the sailors and all the theology side. But what if it's literally something like that, just for that little precursor? Because not only when Pope Francis became Pope on March 13th, a few days later, on March 18th, Putin was re-elected. And I think it was the same week the Chinese president was elected as well. Now, that's all significant in terms of communism and everything else, and Russia being the key prophetic country. But remember when this, it's in Mariana's book in Medjugorje, you know, Our Lady doesn't appear to me in March 18th because it's my birthday. She appears because it's a significant date for the future. And she's told us that March 18th, the 25th of the month, why we fast on Wednesdays and Fridays, all will become clearer when the events start to come. These are significant dates for a reason. And the only thing I know with March 18th was the re-election of the Russian president. And Russia's key to all of us. So that's the only thing I can link with that. But the
Interesting.
all this is what was that? I keep forgetting. You wouldn't think I studied 2 years Latin at the Angelicum, but what's that Latin phrase? As things speed up towards the end.
Yeah, motus in fine velocior.
Yeah. And I remember Marie Julie Jahenny also said France would be the spark. And it's the eldest daughter of the church. And the only thing I think when again in 2024, where we had the Olympics, I'm sure you've already covered this.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
just going to put this back up.
Yeah, the blasphemy and then Sacre
Yeah.
Coeur being lit up. That's a great image. I'm glad you have that there. We're actually going to be there in less than 2 weeks.
But do you know our good friend Xavier gave us a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I just had a long podcast with him, and I asked him to go into that history because
All right, good,
when you
good.
and I talked about it, I said I want to get it right from as we say, the horse's mouth. And so yeah, he walked us through the significance of that history and the connection between the bishop
Yeah, Marie
and
Julie
Marie Julie Jahenny. So
in 2024.
yeah, it is. It's interesting. Here's a question, and then I'll probably want to just start to wrap things up a little bit so that we can give a lot of people things to process more, and I'll definitely have you back if you have some more time, because things are quickening, and between now and by the time we get done with our pilgrimage, September 21st, 22nd, or whatever, who knows what's going to be going on even then. The fall season, September, October is almost always when some of the most significant things happen, even in history, and the not just in the spiritual world with like the miracle of Fatima, um, and Lepanto and those kinds of things, but it's also um, oh, I just lost my train of thought.
Into the fall.
Oh yeah, we see that in the political world. The fall is when there's been like the biggest stock market crashes. Just a lot of things have happened, big changes, especially here in the United States. But they always talk about this October surprise. You always, here in America, we hear that a lot. There's going to be an October surprise. And we've been promised from the World Economic Forum, or, well, from Klaus Schwab, there's going to be cyber attacks. There's going to be all these different things that are going to happen. And they will be shocking. That's all we really know. We don't know exactly how or when, but they are very deliberate in broadcasting what they're going to do. And, um, I don't know if that's a Masonic thing or whatever, but I've heard that from multiple sources how one of the things that they do, it's almost like a psychotic killer who will tell his victim what he's going to do to them before he does it. And it creates fear on top of them what he's going to do. It's that diabolical, but is I mean, Bill Gates has talked about the next pandemic that was coming or that is coming will certainly get everybody's attention. Imagine a cyber attack that will make COVID, whatever the disruptions of COVID seem like nothing. And then you have, a figure like Donald Trump who's running, and regardless of what anybody thinks of him, he is such a figure that disrupts all of those plans. So there's no way that they could have him, achieve office. So you begin to see the theological, ecclesiastical, the political, the social, and the economic, everything converging into this, assassination attempt on him. It's probably getting my channel completely blocked by the time this thing gets aired for putting it on there. But all of these things happening, and yeah, it's this particular phase is rapidly coming to that end. For the next one is sort of like the seven trumpets and the seven bowls. They're happening almost simultaneously now when everything is converging. That's affecting so many different aspects of society. But then there's going to be something else. And so maybe the last thought that I'd like to know your thoughts on is, where does this Jubilee fit into this? Because if without that, it's it's very without a strong faith, without really trusting and knowing also the promises that Our Lady has given. Like, at the end, there's going to be a turn, and it's going to be like a Lord of the Rings. Like Gandalf will arrive, look to the east, yeah, and he'll come down and and go down the Helm's Deep, and the battle will turn. And you know, so that's going to happen. We know that that is, but the interim. Is you can't escape it. If you put any thought into what's going on in the world, you you don't need prophecy to tell you that we're on the verge. Like, we're literally standing on a cliff, a precipice. And yet this Jubilee's coming, which is a positive thing. Jubilees has, as you know, great significance in the biblical times. I mean, talk about the Great Reset of the World Economic Forum, which is completely antithetical to all things, not just Christian, but human. Um, and then you have, the divine reset of, you could say, of Fatima, and then you have a Jubilee, which in biblical times was often a time of a reset of debts and those kinds of things. So it's like, you CBC there, the CBDC, central bank digital currencies are coming. They need catastrophes to usher these things in. Um, they're not the kind of solutions we want of forgiveness of debt, because it'll come with just join the system. And now everybody's like, my gosh, oh, that's the mark of the beast. So what do you see as something, as the positive aspect of this Jubilee in light of all of this? And then I'm going to wrap it up because I just got a word that we're leaving for my daughter's birthday party.
All right, cool. Well, I think we've got the last 9.5 minutes according to this anyway for the recording. So
Oh, yes, that's right.
the positive side is God's in control no matter
Hmm.
what. But everything that's already been said from the private revelation side, we're focusing 24, 2025, everything in the timeline, the popes, Marie Julia Johanna, the prophecies, everything is merging together like a jigsaw, and we're starting to see it a little bit more clearer. Not perfectly, and we're not
Hmm.
trying to, because that's up to God. But this
Right.
is what He's allowing us to see, and we're seeing it. At the same time, we need to take in, because I am starting to wonder, are we starting to see the spirit of Antichrist, whether it's capital A or small a, whether it's many or one, we don't know. But look at, like you says earlier, with Cardinal Karol Wojtyła at the time in 1976 at the Eucharistic Congress, John Paul
Hmm.
II. We're now standing in the face of the greatest historical confrontation humanity has ever
Hmm.
experienced. I do not think that the wide circle of the American society or the whole wide circle of the Christian community realize this fully. We are now facing the final
Hmm.
confrontation between the church and the anti-church, between the gospel and the anti-gospel, between Christ and the antichrist. The confrontation lies within the plans of divine providence. It's still up to God. It is therefore in God's plan, and it must be a trial which the church must take up and face courageously.
So, yeah.
Now, final confrontation, the anti-church, the anti-gospel, the anti-Christ, final confrontation. And then let's double that up with Lucia of Fatima. Quote,
Oh yeah, the final battle between
Father,
God and Satan.
yeah, a time will come when the decisive battle between the kingdom of Christ and Satan will be over marriage and family. Now, this is a different quote because I remember as she says the church and the anti-church, the gospel
Hmm.
and the anti-gospel. It'll be over marriage and family, the final confrontation, final
Hmm.
battle again. And those who will work for the good and for the family will experience the persecution and tribulation, but do not be afraid because Our Lady has already crushed his head. Now, that crushing of the head, as you
Hmm.
gave me in your channel, in the interview on my channel, Our Lady Guadalupe, the 500-year anniversary,
Hmm.
2031, rode the back with the miraculous medal, the anniversary, 200 years, 2030. Why in 1929 did she come back to Lucia and say now's the time to consecrate Russia? It wants it done. It goes the same way as the French Revolution did with the Sacred Heart, 1929 takes us to 2029. So something between 2029 and as people say 2033 is the 2000 year since Christ. But if the calendars are off, where it's the Julian calendar, the Jewish calendar, the Jubilees, or whatever calendar in the mix, there is actually one with Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich who
Hmm.
wrote in it. Now, she witnessed Jesus in this vision teaching the Pharisees how the Egyptian calendars were wrong. And
Hmm.
it's actually the year 4028 since the creation of man. He at the time was 31. Now, like I say, the calendars might be different, but if we added 2 years on at 33 years of age, that'd be 4030. 2000 years would be 2030. And do you think these Luciferian powers are just by chance wanting it to be 2030 for the Great Reset?
Hmm.
This is the
Agenda
divine.
2030, United Nations, everything it converges to that. And then of
I'm
course
choosing the divine
2031
reset.
is, yeah, and then the next year 31 is the 500th anniversary of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is a mystery that I find very interesting, is just now I think beginning to become more clear for people. For me, within the last couple of years, it was really through Fulton Sheen that I began to see the significance of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the conquest of the reconquest of the Americas, but even beyond that, the whole world. Because as we're going to our trip in just 12 days or so, we're going to be going to Guadalupe, Spain, which was the last place that both Christopher Columbus and Cortez visited to basically consecrate their voyages to the New World, which was called the New Spain, the
Mm.
last place. And now there's a royal monastery that marks that spot that we'll be going to. And and that's the old world was dying. About they say about the millions of people that left the Catholic Church was the millions that were replenished in Mexico City, after the Aztecs were conquered and they all converted 9 million in 8 years. They say they estimated 9 million left during the Protestant Revolution, at the same time in the 1500s. So now it all comes full circle. And
Everything.
we talked about this in your podcast when I was on
Yeah.
that was is now we're at the end of the sixth day of 1,000 years since creation. And then the seventh day is the day of rest. Well, day of rest
Yeah.
corresponds with the inner peace. So it that is, I mean, that is definitely the hope. And my mind's like, so I only have to really maybe prepare for certain things. Like I got a really short thing. I don't have a long-term investment plan. It's like that's why I keep saying
Oh, forget
everything that we
that.
have needs to
Yeah.
be put into it right now versus when I hear people talking about like retirement stuff, I kind of cringe. I'm like,
But you know what it is, and I'm just conscious of the time, like you were saying with the
oh yeah,
Lord of
you're
the
right. We're about
Rings.
to end on this Zoom part of it.
Some people are still in the Shire, unaware of what's happening in the battles elsewhere. This guy from Lanarkshire is on the path with Frodo. And it's probably the Scottish guy with second breakfast, you know, the him it was in the actor. But you can see everything happening. And we've already saw, I think it was probably a trial of the global IT outage a few weeks ago. I'm big right now in Our Lady as the new Ark of the Covenant, just like the Levitical priests took them over the Jordan, you know, and then the Jericho, all the story in the book of Joshua. The bridge to the triumph, she tells us at Medjugorje, the bridge to the triumph is the priests. You know, so the new Ark of the Covenant, it's the typology of the Ark. The new Ark's bringing us into this new promised era. The sixth day with the beasts. You're hearing it from John Paul II. You're hearing it from Lucia of Fatima. The final battle. The final battle. We're talking anti-Christ, anti-church. I think it's that whiffery, like the Lord of the Rings. Those who know what's happening, those who don't. We're getting ready for the battle. We're getting ready for the tribulation these
Hmm.
next years. And next year, the year of Jubilee, remember Jubilee, the ram's horn going round Jericho before the trumpet blast and to mark the Jubilee year. We're going to see everything starting to crumble. Your money, it's going to create chaos to bring in the digital agenda and the new reset. But we need to make sure we're walking with the ark. We need to make sure we're walking with the true ones of Christ and let Our Lady guide us. As in the book of Joshua, it says, let the ark guide you to the place you've not been before. This is all new for us as well. And that's why we need to fall and stay strong, because I think we're entering this time of tribulation and hard times, but
Hmm.
we're spiritually and mentally getting prepared for it. And that's where our treasures needs to be. I think common sense, like Noah and the ark, to the Egyptians getting the 7 years of the harvest, or the years of the harvest, we need to start getting ourselves a little bit prepper mode, but more importantly, the spiritual. And I think we're going to
Absolutely.
start seeing it crumbling about us as the mark the trumpet blast at the year of Jubilee next year. And all this is merging together. And I'll leave it with you in the final words.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we only have a few seconds left, and you nailed it. And I just want to say that's the whole point of what Our Lady said at Fatima. My Immaculate Heart will be your refuge and the way that will lead you to God. The ark, she's the ark of the covenant of the Old Testament, wherever it was. It triumphed. The God's people were victorious because it brought his presence, what was in there. But she's also the ark of salvation. She's mentioned that, our Lord has mentioned that too, in places like San Nicolas, Argentina. She is the new ark. We are in the new times of Noah. And we're the people that are being mocked and laughed at, like Noah was, while we're trying to prepare people to enter the ark of our Blessed Mother, and they're rolling their eyes. But that is the answer, so that no matter where we are, the triumph will always be. And I think that's the big takeaway is that's why we consecrate ourselves and renew that consecration every day and live it out to the full. All right. Well, yeah, we are back. And this flip-flopping between Ecamm and Zoom is, it's just the way it is, I guess. But I think we managed to get in more than enough for people to chew on and digest. And I think that final note on Zoom was just right where we need to end. The answers are right there. It's plain and simple, so simple that it was given to a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 10-year-old in Fatima. And you look at all these major messages too have been given to little children. So um, I think that's our big takeaway. And I think you've given us, especially through that great presentation, um, things uh, to prayerfully discern, and also to apply our intelligence to be like you can't ignore these things. I think that's the key. You just cannot ignore what is right before our eyes. And Jesus said, when Jesus was standing in front of them, and he was talking about other ways that they know what's going on in the world. He says, but how is it that you cannot understand the signs of the times when the word was made flesh and speaking to them in the flesh? So when we think, how do people not get it? It's right before them. Well, Jesus was right before those people as well. And we need to pray for them and to continue to and be willing to be prophets for our times. When we're baptized, there's 3 offices that we learn about, that we enter into of Christ, as Christ the priest, prophet, and king. And this is an age where we are his watchmen, we are his prophets for the sake of the salvation of souls. And I think my last thought is, I think maybe that Jubilee, this upcoming Jubilee, is the final sifting and recruitment for the armies of the kingdom of Christ and the armies of the kingdom of Antichrist. But I believe everybody, especially when we think about the global illumination of conscience, also called the warning prophesied out of Garabandal and other saints and mystics, that everybody will be given the choice, though. So we need to pray, like Fulton Sheen says, that our hearts are like wax, because not everybody's going to say yes after they even see their lives as Jesus sees them and the effects of their sins. He says, the sun shines on both wax and clay alike. Wax, when it shines on wax, it melts. When it shines on clay or on mud, it hardens into clay. And we need to pray that we ourselves aren't of clay, of the mud, but are ready. And I think this is a glorious time that awaits us. And I think we need to keep each other in prayer and our families in prayer as well. So I'm sorry I had myself on that full screen there as we came back, but I'm going to give the final thoughts to you, Mark, as we go.
No, I think we're on the same page for sure, and to have yourself wanting to speak to me based on what you like that I do in the channel, because you've way advanced more with the studies and the finalization of it all, whereas I left seminary earlier and never finished off all of it. So sometimes people hold on to a lot of that, with the letters at the end of names and things, but as Mother Angelica says, it's the ST that you want at the beginning of the name, and that's what we're aiming for. But yeah, I think we're getting gathered to get into that arc now as the new Jubilee approaches. I think as matters as hard as things are going to be, we're choosing the right one, and I think everything in my life I'm seeing is coming at a good time, the correct time, and God's timing's always perfect, even when we think at the time it's not. When it occurs, it does. And yet, last year, it's all or nothing. That's what I'm holding on to. And Lucia said that once in her writing as well. You need to choose a side. It's all or nothing. No more half in, half out, 90% in, pick and mix Catholics. It's either the all truth, the full truth, which is Christ, the truth, the way, the truth, and the life, or it's whatever else. But you need to think of what it is to get into heaven. And I think the powers that be in this earthly world are going to start showing panic and chaos financially and all the rest of it. And that crumbling might come as early as next year, the year of Jubilee, just like Jericho crumbled down. But remember, it was the people of God who inherited it all anyway. And if our eyes need to be fixed in heaven, and maybe we can talk again about taking practical plans, like storing up a few months' worth of food for each person in the house and things, whether it's to invest a little bit in gold and silver just in case. Because we see the powers that be, from the BRICS treaty nations to the digital seeking West and the control. Because remember, what is all this global agenda and all this? Lucia Fatima again and Garabandal both tell us, when communism returns, when communism engulfs the world, that ain't an army or a country. That's your globalist agenda, the Great Reset, as I truly believe. And I think it's as clear as looking at you right now on screen, Peter. I think we're actually at the point where we're going to enter these last few chaotic years before the great day of triumph. And please God, we're all going to sail through it with His grace. And like John Bosco, we're in that ark with the church. The waves are coming, the enemies are coming, but our focus to get that peaceful water is the Eucharist and Our Lady. That's how I would finish on that.
Yeah, chain yourself as the ship did. They chained themselves to both of them. So frequent communion, preparing yourself for communion, adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, and of course, Rosary, consecration to Mary. That's the message. That's the message of Fatima. It's the message of Medjugorje. It's the message of all the places where she's given the remedy. It's always, always the same. So let's not overcomplicate it, or even just complicate it in any way, because it is that simple. Like just like I always like this clip from National Treasure. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah,
Nicolas Cage. I know it's like I'm always going off against the Freemasons, and of course it's got the Freemasons in it. But there's actually a neat plot if you want to look at the metaphor of the story. This is basically how it ends. So if you haven't seen it, it's a spoiler, but it's been out for 20 years. When they all seemed like it was lost, literally lost and taken, and everything they worked for and sacrificed for came to nothing. What does he do? He has a thought that comes to his mind, and it was the very first clue that he ever had. And it was, the secret lies with Charlotte. And he pulls out the meerschaum pipe, and he realizes that it goes into that key, that spot, that keyhole that was fit exactly to the pipe. And he looks at it, and he says, Nicolas Cage, could it really be that simple? And he slides it in. And he puts the thing in, he turns it, and we know he pushes it, opens up to the treasure of treasures. That is a powerful analogy, metaphor for, in the spiritual world, for our Blessed Mother, and even for our times, is that, could it really be that simple? Is the message of Fatima, is it, it's that simple. The secret lies with our Blessed Mother, and she's made it clear. And like Jesus says, it's interesting, thank you, Father, for you have not revealed these things to the wise and the learned, but to the children, to the humble, the simple. That's for us. And this secret does lie with Mary. No matter what we hear, whatever it is, if you genuinely put yourself in the refuge of her Immaculate Heart as a father of your family, put every single day, make that the first prayer of your day, consecrate your day, and then I put my family in the refuge of your Immaculate Heart, Mother Mary. And then be at peace. She will protect them. She will. I firmly believe that. And so it's that simple. And we've got, if you're you're panicking and you happen to be in Scotland, well, I think Mark can give you a couple of places to go. But you have the shrine of Carfin, I think it is. Carfin, or go there. And yeah, Mark will show you the way.
Yeah, with the grace of God, with the Lord.
Get out of England, get back home.
There are plenty of hills in Scotland. I'll be fleeing the hills just like Jesus told us to.
Or you can just come to Idaho. Come to Idaho. All right. Well, Mark, thank you so much for all of your time and for all that you shared. You've given me lots to chew on as well. I want to thank everybody for watching us here. Please do your best to, before you go, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to this channel so that we can draw more people to it. And Mark, you have a channel of your own. Before they go, please direct them on how they can follow what you're doing.
Yeah, it's just the name of the channel is my name, Mark McLean. It's McLean, and it sounds the same as John McLean.
I was going to say Die Hard relation there. It's all or nothing.
Just a
Die
different
Hard.
spelling. My granddad was called John McLean, believe it or not. It's my middle name, John. Mark Die Hard, John McLean. But yeah, if you just search Mark McLean, or the tag is at Prophecy Prepper. But Mark McLean, you'll get me there. Yeah.
There it is.
Based on all these prophecies.
Well, it is true. The important part is that it translates into what we do. And the greatest time really to be alive. So follow Mark. Go to at Prophecy Prepper on YouTube, just as this channel, Fulton Sheen, at Fulton Sheen Institute. Make sure you like both of our pages, subscribe, let everybody know about it. Are you on any other socials like X?
Yeah, I never cared for Twitter, but I'm loving X these days.
That's the place to go. I'm going to be moving probably a lot of stuff there. So, all right. Well, what's your X account?
Just again, I've changed everything to my name now, so it's Mark McLean on X.
All right.
I've got Instagram, Prophecy Preppers, you know, things like that. But you'll find Mark McLean and more.
Okay, sounds good. There it is. We'll check it out. God bless you, Mark. God bless your family. And yeah, when we get back from our trip in not too long, we'd love to reconnect and see where we are as we approach the October surprise, whatever that may be.
October 13th.
Oh. I know. All right. Thanks, Mark. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless. Take care.
Right is right if nobody is right. Wrong is wrong if everybody is wrong. And believe me, in this error-infested world, what we really need is a church and an authority that is right not when the world is right, but one that is right when the world is wrong.
Never in history has the prayer of the Rosary been more needed to save our families, our countries, and defeat the evils of the world than now. The Fulton Sheen Institute worked closely with the Roman Rosary to develop the most unique, beautiful, and meaningful rosary that was inspired by Fulton Sheen's World Mission Rosary. This special handcrafted rosary continues Sheen's passion to support the mission of the Church to evangelize the entire world. Each decade of the rosary has a different color, which corresponds with a different continent. Yellow for Asia, red for the Americas, white for Europe, blue for the nations of Oceania, and green for Africa. Each Fulton Sheen Aroma Rosary comes with a set of 4 pure essential oil blends that have been chosen for their therapeutic and theological significance. These blends correspond to the 4 mysteries of the Rosary. Simply choose the oil for the mystery of the day, drop a small drop in the palm of your hand, and massage the oil over the surface, being sure to catch the lava beads. You're good to go, and your prayer will linger longer with these beautiful aromatic notes. Every Fulton Sheen Aroma Rosary you purchase supports our mission to fight the battle for the hearts and souls of the Christian family and lead our world back to God. So visit the Fulton Sheen Institute's store and pick up your beautiful Fulton Sheen Aroma Rosary today. Get one for you, your family members, and your close friends, and don't forget your pastor. Thank you so much for your prayers and your support.